Governor Rick Snyder has unveiled his $48 billion budget plan. Approximately three-quarters of it focuses on education, health, and human services. The governor says his plan makes sure that taxpayer dollars are used wisely. We break down the governor's 2013 budget on West Michigan Week. And thank you for joining us on West Michigan Week. On the panel, Carol Vallee, Grand Rapids Business Journal. Thank you for joining us.
You bet.
Paul Isley, economist at Grand Valley State University, Seidman College of Business. You're kind of a hybrid role today. Yeah. You're both panelist and guest.
There we go.
And our guest, Senator Tanya Shootmaker, Republican Lawton. And we have House Representative Roy Schmidt, Democrat, Grand Rapids. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First impressions. Who wants to take this first?
Senator's always first.
All right. Well, I'll go first. I think that after years of having budget shortfalls and a structurally imbalanced budget with one-time fixes, I was very happy to see that because of the decisions that we made last year in last year's budget, that this year there's no one-time fixes, there's no gimmicks. In fact, you know, while I'd love to see more money going towards our priorities, it's nice to see that the governor laid out a budget that is fiscally sustainable going into the future. It's balanced, and I think he prioritized the citizens' needs and wishes. I also think that he said that we're not going to just fund government anymore. We're going to expect results and hold programs accountable. So that was very good to see that he put metrics and best practices in his budget.
A little different tone this time around, talking about having kind of the carrot and stick this time around. Roy, how do you look at this budget?
Well, in general, I don't really disagree with Senator's comments, other than, you know, we don't have the one-time fixes because that structure is in the form of the pension tax. And so that's a whole new world, I think, for people opening up their eyes to see that, you know, somebody with income that's set is taxed. So one, that's why, and I give the governor and the legislature kudos for them doing it. I didn't support it, but you know, not to be the one that whacks it and says, you know, that's what they did. I would have liked to seen a sales tax on services or something to provide that. But saying that, yes, we're in a different position, and the governor has used these incentives, and as his business background, I can see it more and more, and in some of the cases, I think it works really well, and some of them not so well.
I know education is one area you have some concern. Let's break down the education budget. We have a graphic here. The education budget for 2013 as proposed is $14.7 billion. K through 12 would see a 1% increase, and additional money would be set aside for best practices. What that means is there would be money for schools that would provide dual enrollment and advanced placement courses, offering online or blended learning and demonstrate academic achievement, and $179 million would go towards teacher pensions. As we move on here, we go to colleges and the community colleges. $12.5 million would go towards early education. Some of that money would come from the budget surplus. A 3% funding increase for Michigan's 15 universities, and some of that money would be based on limiting tuition increases to 4% or less, and 3% funding increases would go towards community colleges. So there's the budget, at least through for education. You, I know, believe more money needs to go towards education.
Well, let's talk K through 12 first. You know, we recently, and we call Kent Caucus, my friends on the other side, and Rep. Dillon, we met with our new superintendent, and I'm blessed to be my 20th year as elected, and I've never been too excited every time they bring a new superintendent in, because it almost seems like a revolving door. I think they were very impressed with what they heard and what they've seen, and they're saying they last year, with that cut of, I believe it was 370, and then the two previous years, 170, or 300, then 170. They're saying, you know, we've done everything we can. We've cut back. We've done a lot of the incentives, a lot of things the governor and the legislature suggested. We just can't. We can't do that. I mean, we need that money back. So I'm not saying, I'm saying just give us that money back. Give that money back. No more increases. I wouldn't ask for any more increases. They just are at a point where, hey, they've gone beyond all they can, and that's one piece in education that I think we're all a little concerned about, and so I hope that gets addressed, and I think we all agreed, you know, and I won't say it from my colleagues on the right side, but I know they're concerned that Grand Rapids, an urban core district, is so much different than other districts, and that's what we need to, I think, work together on a little bit more.
Where does the money come from? If we're, you know, from your perspective, this is the way to go?
You know, you have to balance the sheet, you know, and I'm a little disheartened because the other side of the aisle, they don't want to restructure the tax code, you know, to make it fair, simple, and reasonable, but yet they also don't vote for the cuts and they don't vote for the reforms. So at the end of the day, you have to balance the budget, and if you're going to say that you're not going to support the cuts, then, you know, what taxes are you going to raise? And I think that's kind of been the dialogue missing from the other side, is where's your solution?
Well, the Democrats had offered a solution last fall, which I think, you know, certainly had some interest around the state and on both sides of the aisle, at least in discussion. So, Senator, you would look at the governor's spending plan as being comprehensive and not one where you might bring to bear some other opinion in regard to those priorities.
Oh, certainly. I think the governor's budget is just a start from a discussion. Obviously, the way the process works is the Senate will produce a plan for discussion purposes, and also the House. But roughly, I think
is this acceptable?
Guidelines.
Do you, as you're on appropriations in the Senate, so this is acceptable to you? You know, to see education at this level, at this point.
Well, certainly, we did provide an increase to education, which is, you know, I do share with Representative Schmidt's comments that, you know, I think most people prioritize education in our state. So it was nice to see that we didn't have to cut education anymore, and in higher education,
no more cuts is better than being, you know, slain.
Right. That we did see a 3% increase in higher education funding.
A 30% decrease, though, over the last 11 years.
This is
to
true.
Colleges and universities.
This
30% for public universities. But education is number one in your mind. I guess I'm still not, as you know, just an onlooker, unsure how we say education is such a priority. Governor Snyder has even talked about renewing the Michigan Promise for students who have need, and those things don't get, I mean, they're not weighted, at least by the budget spending. And so I guess I look for
well, I think, you know,
conversation
you
and
can
explanation.
give money, but I think also if you look back at the last year, the reforms that we made so that it doesn't have to come out of students' pockets, or the reforms in this budget, but also in K-12, the reforms are going to save school districts, because right now, even if you funded them with increases, the cost structure of them with regards to their no competition with healthcare plans was not sustainable. And so the reforms that we made made it so that you could have more dollars go into that classroom. And as a mother of children, that's important to me.
Sure. I guess maybe I'm looking more specifically at the tremendous losses at the university level, and what the think tanks around the state and around the country say about that. Michigan's rank in terms of education spending, and what that appears to say about the state, and you know, what motivation there is to really address systemic change in that
well, and I think
priority.
That's the exact point that Governor Snyder made at his budget presentation is, you know, we wish we were at a different metric level in terms of our base right now, but here's where we want to go into the future. And really that equates to creating jobs in the private sector. And I think getting rid of the Michigan business tax, which was a jobs-killing tax, which helped chase out more jobs than, you know, the close to the 1 million jobs that we lost.
I'm going to come back to personal property tax.
Will help. Will help fund, you know, to make it so that we get those jobs back and we have more people working, and hence more revenues in the state coffers.
Representative?
20 years ago, the state contribution was 80% tuition of a young man or young lady. Now it's 20%. You know, that's why I separated K-12. I think we need to work in a bipartisan way. And I'm not giving Jennifer Granholm, the former governor, a slap on the back saying great job and then no on Rick Snyder. Absolutely not. It's a calamity. The cost that these students are coming in and having $30,000, $40,000, and $50,000 debts. We have to do this in a bipartisan way. I think it's close to a calamity what's going to be happening. And we need to work on this together. I mean, 80-20, 20 years? Give me a break. This is crazy. I mean, but it isn't, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm saying we either have to address it or we're going to see this come down and hit us all and wonder, well, what's happening to our 15 universities? We're having terrible problems with all of a sudden tuition. Young adults are going to decide they're going somewhere else, or we want to keep them for jobs, but it's kind of a joke because now they're coming here knowing what kind of, I'm talking about middle class kids that, you know, can't get the money for a scholarship, but yeah, they're going to be able to get those loans, and so it's a bad situation, and I think together we need to work. I'm not blaming anybody. This is not something we blame on either side.
So there might be more work in this regard
Yes.
Before this budget is passed.
I hope so.
Well, I definitely think that's how the legislative process works.
One hopes. Go ahead.
Well, you know, certainly we'd like to see education be a priority because certainly that's going to create job growth as well. And it's something that we're quite worried about right now in Michigan because we lag so far behind in college education, the percentage of the workforce that's there. And actually what's worse than that is we have a perception issue in Michigan that college education isn't worth it. And that's being augmented when we see the state government say that it's not that important. So how do we redress that given the budget situation? Where would you take from in order to go there?
Well, I think that you're presuming, I think the governor did say that education is a priority, and you know, we all wish we had more money. The fact of the matter is we only have so much, and I think the general public does not want their income tax raised, or any other taxes for that matter. So you have to live within your means, and you know, relatively speaking, compared to other budgets in the other departments, I think there has been a priority of education in this budget.
And I know that we're taking a look also at protection in the state, public safety. Michigan State Police will get a 16% budget increase. I know that's been talked about in recent weeks. Some of the public safety issues in the metro areas in the state are not doing well compared to other areas across the country. How necessary is this sizable increase?
I think it's a great idea, and I think some of the ill effects could, again, be brought about revenue sharing, and again, two previous administrations that decided we didn't have the money, so let's go take it from the cities that we made a promise to keep that money, and we're both guilty again. I mean, you know, it's getting our priorities straight. I want to go back to this education, just say no, it is not a priority. Because if it was a priority, we'd be sitting together and finding ways to fix it. And I'm not blaming, again, I want to say that because I don't believe that, you know, slamming one side or the other, but it's not a priority. Higher education is not a priority. K-12 is not a priority. And I'm glad we're putting money into public safety, but I want to hope that money stays in there so we don't have to hire a bunch of police officers and let them go.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about transportation, our roads, and revenue sharing in just a minute. Back. We're discussing the 2013 budget proposals from the governor, and we're going to get into revenue sharing now, and we'll break it down with 2% increases or $14 million. That's per the state constitution. Municipalities will also see or share a $30 million increase based on the state statute, and somebody can explain this stuff to me. $25 million of the $30 million will be set aside as incentives for consolidation, and $4.5 million will be put aside for state-appointed review teams, and of course those are the ones who appoint the emergency manager. So revenue sharing, I know a lot of communities are glad to see that there's going to be an increase there. Here in Grand Rapids, state capital for road repairs dries up in 18 months. Again, is this kind of this, we've got to start somewhere after so many years of depleting those funds? Is this a drop in the bucket, or is it a starting point?
Well, you know, we all want more money. The fact of the matter is we have to live within our means. And, you know, I think the governor has said that we're no longer just going to throw money out there, that we're going to expect performance measures, metrics, and we're going to hold communities responsible for exercising best practices. And if you look at getting the reforms that we made in terms of the Urban Cooperation Act, that will get communities working together. So no longer is it going to be a disincentive to consolidate and share resources. You're going to actually collaborate. And I think that anytime you can collaborate and save taxpayer money and put more roads or put more money into education or infrastructure, that's a great thing.
But the funding structure has been backwards. I think if you're sitting at City Hall in any city or township and you think, well, wait a minute. I know in Grand Rapids since 2002, $100 million lost in revenue sharing of what goes to Lansing and does not come back.
Those are problems in Kalamazoo right now too, with all the layoffs going on.
When does the structure change? I think is the question a lot of communities ask.
Well, I think that the way that we've done it is not so much to have Lansing dictate who's going to consolidate, how you're going to share resources, but to really allow a lot of flexibilities to allow local communities to think outside the box, and really they are the ones that know best on how to save money for the taxpayer.
Well, Roy, you were part of that for a long
Yeah.
while before serving in the House.
Briefly, in 1984 was when the agreement was reached that the state would take over the taxing abilities and give us revenue sharing. And of course, again, when it got popular,
It was all money supposed to be returned.
Returned to the city.
guaranteed
This
to be
wasn't like a
returned.
gift. This was public safety parks, and again, both administrations decided when money was low, we'd take from them. And of course, what all that did is mess up the cities, and then you have things like emergency managers. It was kind of like, do you really believe this is crazy? But let me say this: Senator Schumacher and I both supported the Urban Cooperation Act. We worked really hard at getting that together and saying, you know, we need to, you know, saying that, hey, revenue sharing is getting hit, let's deal with it, and urban cooperation gives the opportunities for everybody together. So one thing I like what the governor's doing on incentives like consolidation for revenue sharing and giving out, because Grand Rapids is going to come out ahead more than most, because we've been doing it for years. This is not that they had to start telling us in Lansing. I was able to serve 16 years, and we did get it here, and a lot of other communities. So I like those incentives that he's saying, you know, you need to work at and you need to do more of, because we've done them. And so he's starting to put that pot back in a little bit. So, hey, you can't always, you know, blast. I think, you know, that's that CPA in him. He's saying you're going to give you some of that back, but you're going to work for it. And it's not enough, but hey, it's a start.
But should there be more? I mean, we talk about the value of core cities and keeping the young talent here and making sure that businesses see the infrastructure is in working condition. You two are in business and talk to business people every day of the week. I mean, what are you hearing from people about at least this budget proposal along those lines?
What government? I think in this area there has been, since 1984, a lot of those governments consolidating. Saugatuck Douglas is probably the state model for that kind of effort on the part of grassroots. on the part of the citizens. And there have been shared services here between Kentwood and Wyoming, and then including the city. So I agree with Roy, and I think that that's a real positive. Where I see the rubber hitting the road is really in more basic services like transportation and the condition of the roads. Those things impact transportation and the movement of goods and services across the state and throughout, the regions. So, if there's some emphasis and some concern about the losses in revenue sharing, it would be those that especially impact those basic things like driving down the street. Ottawa.
Parks.
Try North Ottawa.
You mentioned transportation. Is some of the budget, I mean, we're going to see some increases, but is the governor also banking on working out a bridge deal here that's going to bring in more match dollars from the feds? Is that part of?
Will that be separate?
Is that part of
As
the
I
game
understand the
plan?
budget, that is not part of his budget, is banking on any of the bills with regards to infrastructure or the bridge.
I sit on transportation, and I've been working with the governor's office, and actually we had lunch a couple weeks ago and started the process of bipartisan transportation bill. So we're talking about them. In fact, one of them, the bill I have is best practices, and I think it's a good bill. We had a hearing on it last week, and got a couple smacks on it, but I mean it's we're working together, and I like that. We need to see more of that.
So the budget proposal is likely to be approved by the legislature as you do work to sustain and make systemic change in transportation funding, which could take gas tax, or what kinds of realistic alternatives are you joined on?
I don't think we're joined on any yet. I think this best practice is probably, obviously the Republicans are in control. I sit and I was asked to work on a task force by the chair of transportation, Rep. Opsimer, with Rep. Olson, and we came up with this need for $1.4 billion. And I think it's smart that they decided that they want best practices up first, to make sure that we're lean and mean and we're showing them. From here, I don't think we know where we're going. We're starting the process. We're having extensive meetings after session to explain the bills. We're a long way away, but at least we're having the discussion.
I guess the important piece of that too is the federal funding that can be matched and not losing those dollars. Do you both consider that to be a priority?
Absolutely, that's a priority, and the governor in his budget made sure that we drew down all the federal dollars that were qualified for in this year's budget.
Which is true with the bridge too.
Yeah, true. I want to tell you, I'm a huge proponent of that bridge. I came from West Michigan and okay, what's the story? And it was probably I like to say, the biggest no-brainer in 20 years. I don't see the downside, and I know the governor structured it so absolutely no taxpayer dollars, no matter how many Manny Moran ads you hear at $5 million.
Still confuses people.
It's very confusing, but the chamber has done a great job. One of 7 jobs in West Michigan is related to that bridge. For God's sake, let's get that bridge
I don't
built.
hear any non-support for it in this area.
Yeah. One of the things that I keep hearing from you both is best practices and the metrics. One of the things that worries me when we start matching everything to performance is when you're a company, it's very simple. It's revenue or it's profit. When you're dealing with government, it's not so clear. So the choice of those metrics can cause interesting choices among the people receiving the money. What's being done to try and make sure that that's not happening, that people can't A, game the system because of the metrics, and B, that the metrics are actually making people do what we'd like to see happen.
Transparency issues.
Yeah. Because it's there for transparency, but it's transparency only on the dashboard items. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I do.
Yeah, but I think there's a natural incentive. There's not going to be any cost savings unless municipalities actually do the things. And I'll give you a great example of something. The Parchment decided that they had 3 police officers, all near retirement age. They they decided they would save over $100,000 by contracting with Kalamazoo Township for less services. So I think by the basic necessity that they will need to save money will force them into the reforms to make sure they're not gaming the system. But
And I want to say, I said some of them. I think for education, it absolutely does not work. I look at the 1% increase, you're going to get maybe $100 per student if you follow these 5 or 6 best practices. Trying to compare Grand Rapids and to Rockford or something else is absolutely makes no sense. It's not apples to apples, and that's where it doesn't make sense. And again, I give the governor credit, some of it does work, but it doesn't work in education, Grand Rapids to Rockford or anywhere else. So.
And we'll have to wrap it up there. On the panel, Kara Valet, Grand Rapids Business Journal, Paul Isley, economist at Grand Valley State University, Seidman College of Business, Senator Tanya Shootmaker, and Roy Schmidt,
Thank you.
House Rep. Thank you so much.
thank you.
And thank you for joining us this week. We'll see you next week on West Michigan Week.